It's a darker one, so I got two. Cheers.
Cheers.
Good health.
Good health.
So they quite like being in Birmingham, drinking tea out of paper cups or coffee out of paper cups.
Instant at that. Right. So I'm just going to read out your LinkedIn firstly because I think that's always a bit of fun for people.
Nice.
You describe yourself as an irritatingly good speaker, helping business owners to speak with authenticity, fun, confidence, and you're a speaking coach, professional speaker, and a self-described tattooed brummie with a beard. But having said that, is there anything else you would like to say just to introduce yourself? What would you like the world to know about you?
That's a really good question, actually. So the irritatingly good speaker is not me. Somebody described me as that, and I went, I'm having that because that feels right. And it was from somebody who I highly regard as a story maker and as a speaker who said that, and they were trying to pick holes in what I was doing, and they went, I couldn't. It was irritating. And I was like, fine, I'm having that. In terms of what else, that's a really good question. I think trying to describe what I do has been really hard. Speaker coach is about the most tangible thing I've talked about. Life coaching was the thing I used to talk about before, and I used to describe that as being about as tangible as a fart, because it is. You know, you can't really grasp what it is to have a conversation with someone. But probably the biggest thing that I stand for is people being heard and people being seen and people being able to share what's important to them and their vulnerability and be safe going out into the world. So that's probably the thing I would say. I've got a huge background, which we can dive into.
Well, that's going to be my next question.
Yeah.
How have you found yourself at this position in your career?
You said this was the 7-hour version of this conversation, didn't you? So we might be a while. So I started off a long time ago as a computer programming technician. That was my route. So I started off as a computer programming technician, always had a love for tech, wanted to do that above anything else, but failed most of the courses I was doing on it. And when I left home in 1994, and 1994 was a tough year for various reasons. I had a friend who died, I had a foot ulcer, there was all kinds of stuff going on. I ended up with a job in a nursing home, and it was a job wiping bottoms for a living, and it was one of the best jobs I ever did. Not for the bum wiping, but for what I learned about people. And how to work with people. And my mum had been a nurse. She wasn't a nurse at that point, and it was like a natural progression into healthcare. And then I bumbled along. I realised I wanted more responsibility, so I decided to train to be a nurse. That was a stunted process because most things I do tend to be, and ended up working in A&E. And then in A&E met my ex. She was pregnant with our first. We moved back to the Midlands, and I retrained as a podiatrist. And with the podiatry work was very simply because of my medical history. I was born with spina bifida and a club foot. I had an ulcer at 20, which I kind of referenced in 1994. And I was really intrigued to find out more about what was going on for me. And because I'd been treated by a podiatrist when I retrained, I was like, I know what podiatry is. I can go and do this. So I did that. The bulk of my healthcare career up until 2018 was podiatry. I'm still a registered podiatrist, although I don't use it. And did various different things during that process. But probably the shift to what I'm doing now is there's always been a teaching element, always. I've either been mentoring students or mentoring other members of staff or managing people or doing teaching for undergraduate podiatrists. So there's always been that teaching element there. And then when I started to do all the wanky personal development stuff, which everyone seems to go through at some point in their life, they have the sliding door moment and life is never the same again. I thought, actually, I'm being coached and I can do this for other people. And that's how I kind of knocked on the door of coaching a long time ago. Well, I say a long time ago, probably about 6 years ago, which feels like a long time ago.
Fair play. My mum worked in care homes for a little bit, so I've heard all manner of horror stories that go on in there. But would you say, how hard was that of a transition? You've mentioned, obviously, that you were already essentially mentoring, coaching in whatever form that was, but did you find that a challenge to go from that career experience of employment into where you are now? Because there's obviously a lot more to learn once you start to step into that.
Oh, God, absolutely. And I mean, I've been running my own business now for 2024 for 14 years. So I ran my own podiatry business for 8 years, and that was started from fresh and built up and then sold 8 years later. The practical element of coaching, I kind of joke with people on this one, is it was a case of changing my LinkedIn profile from podiatrist to coach. It was as simple as that. And one of the big wrestles for me is coming from a healthcare background. It's all about qualifications. It's all about what's your qualification, what's your professional registration, what do you have to show that you can actually do the job. And coaching, I don't have any of that. I don't have a piece of paper which says that I can coach. But I have many years of life and plenty of experiences. And when I started coaching, I joined a mastermind, which was being around other coaches, and that was really useful. But it is a big shift, and it's a big shift in terms of knowing that you can actually do the coaching process and say, I am a coach. It's then building and growing a business. As you know yourself, building and growing your own business is not for the faint-hearted at the best of times. And that was a big shift, because being good at something and then being able to market it and sell it are two very different things. So it's a big shift.
Definitely. Is there anything that you would say you miss about what you did previously?
I miss the patience. I've shifted from working in a big hospital with an A&E department at the John Radcliffe in Oxford, one of my favourite ever roles, because you never knew what was going to come through the door. 60 people working in a department, to a department of 40 in podiatry, to 20, to then working on my own. And I miss the patience, and I miss that kind of regular contact with them. But I also miss having colleagues around, which is why I go out and network.
Yeah.
These are people like you, my colleagues. I go out and chat to you, and we have cups of tea and cups of coffee, and we catch up and chat. So I think I miss that real connection in that element. I think the other thing as well is when you're working for yourself, you've got to push yourself. You've got to be the person who gets you up in the morning and carries on doing stuff. And I find that hard. There's no external force other than someone saying your electricity bills are going to go up.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the thing. But I think the benefits far outweigh it.
Absolutely.
The freedom and things like that.
So you strictly just work with business owners, or you strictly coach people in business? Is that right?
I mean, it's one of those really bad niching things where it could be absolutely anyone. Do you have a pulse? Yes, I could probably coach you. But yeah, the niche for me is interestingly, it's probably around people who don't get the opportunity to share their voice. So you go to a 60-second pitch event, a networking event, and it's people reading from the phones and not speaking with any confidence. And I just want people to be able to do that in a way, and not dancing down a set of stairs like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, but just be able to stand up for 60 seconds and talk about what they do and connect with people. So the business owner element, yeah, absolutely. But I have coaches I work with. I've got a client at the moment who's a leadership coach, which is really interesting for the work that she does. I've got speakers who I work with as well. So it's a whole range of people, but yeah, small business owners. I like working with small business owners.
We both know the answer to this, but for the sake of this conversation, anyone listening, why is it important for business owners to be good at communication?
I mean, the communication thing is, it's about connection and understanding for me. People use phones a lot for things now, and how many times do you see an email come through and you go, I'm not quite sure what they're saying, or you read it as something really bad or really offensive or a real problem, whereas actually a phone call could sort it out very quickly. Having a conversation like this, face-to-face, could sort out things very quickly. The beauty of this level of communication is you don't just get, here are my words, you get, here's my personality. If I say something to you, if I go, I really like being here today, and then I'm shaking my head, you know that it's probably not true.
Yeah.
You can't hide when the communication's there, and there's a connection on such a deeper level. For me, it's about, one of the big things about presence. It's about being in a space with somebody and seeing them and noticing them and listening to them. And I'm doing a lot of talking at the moment because you're asking the questions, but being able to connect with people on that level.
Yeah.
And that's a skill, but also knowing who you are in that process. And one of the first things I'll do with my clients is, well, who are you? What are your values? What do you stand for? What's important for you? Because if you know who you are, you can connect much better with other people.
Mm-hmm. So why would you, as far as what you teach, what do you focus on in particular? Because my perspective or my understanding of good communication, it's not just from a business level. But of course, if you're good at communicating, then you can communicate your product or service better.
Yeah.
You can also get better productivity out of your team. Because in my experience, one of the things that led me into doing my own business as early as I could, so I got started when I was like 18, just taking the first steps into it. I'd come from a background of hospitality. I'd worked the kitchen, I'd worked the front. Every step throughout that, there was someone with poor communication skills, and all it does is makes people hate you. It makes people hate their job, and they're not there because they like the job or they want to do a good job. They just want to do what they have to, get out, get the money. So where does what you do tie into that as like a skill set that you teach as well?
It's interesting. So I probably wouldn't refer to it as teaching. And I have been thinking a lot as my marketing shifted recently about, well, if someone sat me down and said, what's your process? And I'm not sure that there is a clear process. So we would have a clear beginning. Who are you? Where are you at the moment? What skill do you have? Where do you want to be? Where is it you want to be in the time we work together? So what's the end goal? And that end goal could be, I want to speak at an event, or I want to have a series of 60-second pitches I can do at an event, or I'm doing a 10 minutes, I want to prep for that. The bit in the middle is the fun bit, because we don't know where it's going to go. And there's different elements to draw on. So there's a line I'll quite often draw for people, and I say, there's the stuff you see in here. There's the video, there's the language, there's the words, there's maybe the big slides up on the screen if you've got a screen. It's the stuff which is unconscious, which people feel. That's the stuff which we probably work on. So how does your tone of voice work? How does your pitch, your pausing, your pace? Because you can talk really quickly, get excited, or you can slow it down, and then you can work on how do you connect with people. There's all of those different elements which are very acting drawn on in some ways. I look at a lot of work of people like Patsy Rodenberg, who's a voice coach for actors. So you've got that bit in the middle, which is less about technique, but it's more about presence. And then we work on practicing. So you go and speak, we record it, we listen to it, we both analyse it, we look at where we can improve it, we look at where we can tweak things. We look at the stories which you use. So you've got, your story about being 18 and the reasons you came out of hospitality and got into the work that you do now. That is a key story in terms of why you do the things that you do now. And that's what will draw people into you. I've got so many stories, because I'm very old, about my life, which I can draw onto. And I help people to bring those stories out. Then what we do is help people with the confidence to actually go and share those stories. Because when you start being vulnerable with stuff, it's painful, it hurts, you think people are going to cancel you, you think people are going to think you're an absolute tool. And there's so many things which will hold you back from doing that. Because you go on video, and we had this conversation a while ago at an event, you go on video, I look at myself on video and go, his nose is big, he sounds like he's from Birmingham, he's got a forehead which goes on for days, my God, look at those wrinkles, he doesn't have a chin, his beard doesn't join. There's so many things which I can look at on myself and think very negatively about, but actually no one else notices those. So it's helping people to be okay with who they are, and then being able to go and speak to the world and just not worry about it. And it's a very, it's almost like having a North Star. We've got a general direction we're going in, but where it goes in that process, nobody knows. That's like there's a Dr. Seuss rhyme, I think, which goes on about that. Where it goes, nobody knows. No, it's not that one. It's Willy Wonka. I always get my Dr. Seuss and my Willy Wonka. It's where he's doing the thing in the tunnel. I'm going off on one now, but you're nodding. You're nodding. You're thinking about it now, and people are listening to this going, "What is he on about?" But we can come back to that later. But it goes where it goes, and the conversation goes within those sessions where it needs to go. And that, for me, is part of the fun. And that leans very closely back into my A&E work. As a nurse, you never know what's going to come through the door.
No, definitely. I can imagine. So the question I'm coming on to now, like, what are the key elements? Because you've touched on the story a bit, touched a little bit on technique, so knowing the steps you've got to take. I can imagine working in A&E, especially, like, people live for the stories. And I imagine that's probably what was so rich about that job as well, is the learning from the people and their experience, because story is what we feed off. It's how we communicate our history and how things work. It's how things are passed down. But from a business owner, if you had to summarize this in like a list of steps someone could do, what are the key elements that a business owner should be considering as a foundational level? If I am, I don't know, let's say I'm not the worst, but I maybe lack a bit of confidence, like you've said. If you could put that into some sort of small little package that's going to be a taster of working with Dave and the value of working with Dave, what are the key elements that people need to just start to consider if they want to start to become a better communicator?
I think the probably one of the biggest ones is understanding, why they want to do it. Because some people will not need to speak as part of the business. I know some people who've got amazing businesses where they don't have to speak to anyone, and they absolutely love it. And e-commerce businesses, you might not have to talk to anyone at all. But if you've got a service-based business, or you've got a business where you work with people, then speaking and communication is a huge part of that. In terms of putting it into a package, that's a really interesting one. But I suppose there's an element of bringing stuff which you've done already. It's almost like I talked to a client the other day about this, that a lot of the speaking work we do it's about having a go at making a clay pot. And you can't make a clay pot until you're willing to actually put some clay on the wheel and stuff up your first few pots. You've got to go out there and speak, and you've got to mess it up. So I'm trying to think about that in terms of how to put that into a package. That's a really difficult one, and we might have to come back to that one.
Okay.
It's a really good question, and I think because of the work I do, it's in some ways it's very organic and fluid.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, just from what I've gathered from what you've said, I can think of a few. Story, really important.
Story, absolutely.
I can't remember where I've heard this, but video content for one. This is one of the things I do. If you lack a story, if you lack something that is someone can in some way relate to, or they feel connected to, then you're not going to have as strong a connection. They're not going to carry the message as much. Generally, people don't like to be sold to, educated to. They have to relate to it, to hook to it. But I think, I'm not sure if you'd agree on this, but what I've seen in my own experience as a foundational level, and you touched on it as well, mindset is everything. Getting started, it's not easy to start with, because you're playing everything over in your head, you're analysing every single aspect, but at the end of the day, people don't really care, because with all due respect, people generally are a little bit more self-concerned.
Well, they are. Rather people are concerned about their own bullshit more than your marketing. So
no one is gonna care about how you look as much as you care yourself. Put it aside, it doesn't really matter. To mindset, I think, before anything else, that's something I've had to, my own personal experience, because my own experience, I wasn't always the most confident. But mindset is everything. It's the way you talk to yourself and the way that you're just approaching a problem. It doesn't matter if I'm going to fail, and actually it's okay to fail, because you've got to learn from those mistakes.
Yeah.
Who was it now? I think it was Zuckerberg. I hate to quote Zuckerberg.
Oh, shivers.
I think one of his was
this when he was in Star Trek as the android?
Who knows? Fail as fast and as often as possible.
Fail forward. Yeah, they talk about failing forward, and depending on who you talk to, and I've come across a great phrase recently, which is cliche. Was it conversation ending cliches? It's like every cloud has a silver lining. If someone's going through some shit and you say every cloud has a silver lining, it's like an instant stop to talk about it. But even things like fail forward, or there's no such thing as failure, or and there's so many different ways of looking at it. I think. It's interesting with the mindset stuff, and I have some very good friends who are mindset coaches and very, very good at what they do, and a lot of it comes down to reframing. The language you use to yourself is important, because you're always listening. And I tell you, some days I use some atrocious language to myself. If my business isn't where I want it to be, I know it's my fault. I'm very, very down on myself, and my girlfriend usually gets to witness that. And I know she probably scratches her head and goes, "Wonders what the hell's going on." But it's really looking at what you can control versus what you can't control. And for me, there's two very clear things you can't control. You can control how you respond to your thoughts, and you can control your actions. There is, if we're looking at neurodivergent approaches, those are a little bit more flexible, because sometimes you do things which you can't control, and sometimes you do things which you don't think about. But then a little bit further down the line, you're like, oh, hang on a minute, I've got to go back and look at that. But if you can look at those two things, you then realise that most of the stuff which goes on for you can't control. You can't control what other people think about you. You can't control the weather. You can't control whether your car's going to break down tomorrow. You've got no control over any of those things. But what we try and do is we try and control those things. So if you come back to the very simple stuff of control how you respond to your thoughts, control your actions, generally you're going to be in a better place. I think it's interesting with things like confidence, particularly around speaking and around video. I get nervous when I speak. I still get up in the morning and go, I don't know what I'm going to talk about today on video. I've got no idea. In fact, I haven't done a video today yet, but something will appear. It might be me talking about this afterwards. And I find it really interesting that even though I know that I've got plenty of evidence of being able to speak and do it really, really well, there's still a little bit of me goes, yeah, but Dave, they're going to find out that you haven't got a proper coaching qualification, or they're going to find out that actually you got suspended from school a week before your GCSEs for punching that poor lad. All of those things, they're going to find out those things. And you tell yourself stories. And it's having a very clear conversation with yourself about the truth of those stories.
Mm.
And mindset's huge. Mindset is absolutely massive, which is where having a coach, I've got 2 coaches. In fact, I've probably got more now. I've definitely got 2 coaches, and they are very much on my side and very supportive. And that's what I do for my clients as well. There is a proper cheerleading and support. Mm. It's I get what you're feeling, and I'm here to kind of work with you and help you. And it's having that support in the background.
Mm. You touched on something that I think it's the lesson that ultimately you learn from just doing the things that are difficult.
Yeah.
Is that it doesn't matter, because things are not always going to go as you intended. But at the end of the day, it's a quantity game. You've got to put out more videos. Generally, it's just putting out. Like you said, you've got to just talk. You've got to fail, and it really doesn't matter, because sometimes things are going to go bad, but you're not in control of things. Control the things you can, and at the very start, even just the way you talk to yourself. I just finished a book. I forget the title. I'll share it after if you're interested.
Mm.
But if I'm not getting the quote wrong, it was something. It talks about that basically. So I don't know what your thoughts are on manifesting, but it basically speaks that your thoughts control your emotions shape your reality. So at a foundational level, just the way you talk to yourself, even if you're not happy, even if things aren't going great, just talk to yourself with kindness, respect. That is going to influence your emotions. Because I think there's been studies done that even just a positive change in how you speak to yourself and putting aside any negative thoughts will have eventually compound and have a positive impact. I can say that from personal experience.
Mm.
Like I said, I wasn't the happiest at times. I wasn't the most confident, but I thought to myself, there's these things I want to do. So I'm going to do it anyway, because even if I can feel like rubbish anyway, but it doesn't matter because I'm still going to go and do it. So even if I'm going to feel sad or however I was feeling, I might as well just do it because I'm going to feel that anyway. But as a result of just taking those steps and starting to slowly prove to yourself, it just starts to compound into, all of a sudden, I'm actually feeling a lot better because I've done it. And it is just about, because there's another, as you can tell, I'm a big fan of quotes.
Quotes are brilliant. I mean, this is what Instagram's built upon.
But one of my favourites at the moment that I live by is, failure feels better than regret. So just do it. Just try it, because it doesn't matter, because everyone else is out there trying. And if anyone is going to try and throw smoke at you just for trying, then they're not your people anyway.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's I find it really interesting. There's a whole group of people out there who are looking to use you to elevate their status. Mm. If you put a quote out and you get it wrong, someone will turn around and go, but you got the quote wrong, which makes you a bad person. It's like, no, you got a quote wrong. And actually, can people give you a little bit of space to get the quote wrong because you're trying? And this is the whole marketing game as well. Marketing is based on showing people things they haven't got and then telling them that they have this thing, their status will improve. Mm-hmm. And it's all a status game. That's why we have iPhones and Androids are also acceptable for some people. And if you've got an Android, that's absolutely fine. But that's why we have marketing, we have advertising, we have all of these things out there. The bigger, shinier car, the nicer house in the nicer area, the clothes with Gucci on instead of Aldi, all of those things. It's all about elevating status. But the kindness thing is huge. And I did start a master's degree in mindfulness and compassion, which any bloke from Birmingham with my tattoos probably would never have thought of doing years ago. But the toughest thing I found in all of that is being kind to yourself. Mm. That's still the bit which I struggle with now, because I will quite happily turn around and go, God, Dave, you're an absolute dickhead. What do you do that for? And you're listening. But compassion, I love compassion as a thing. I was at was at a political event recently and listening to one of the politicians who was probably dressed in blue. I don't need to say any more than that. And they talked about how they were the party of compassion. And in the back of my brain, it's like, you've got no idea what compassion means. And for me, compassion is simply, it's understanding that people have got things which have gone on in their past, which are not their fault. But when they get to this point, you remember that, you hold that into a nice little space. But if they're being dickheads, you tell them.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be responsible. And you know, talking about quotes, there's a quote by one of my old tutors, Choden, in my MSc, who wrote a book, and he has a great quote, which is, I'm going to close my eyes when I think about this. It's not your fault the lightning struck the roof of your house, but it is your responsibility to fix it. And also, there's going to be things which happened in the past, which will still have an effect, 5-10 years down the line from now. But it's appreciating that that's okay. You know, your upbringing, your childhood, all of those things which you have no say over at all, they will have an effect going on into the future. I'm 51. I'm still dealing with things which happened to me at 14, and it's like, okay. So they're there, and it's how you reframe. And I think it's interesting in terms of things like positive psychology. I love the idea that actually everything's an offer, which is an improv thing, but also every cloud does have a silver lining. There is always something to be learned from everything. However, it's being able to be present with those feelings. We're very good as humans at trying to push away sadness. We hate sadness. We hate all the really kind of frustrating emotions. We wish they go away really quickly. And then when we get happy, we hold on to it so tightly we never get a chance to enjoy it. And the reality is they're both the same. They're both fleeting emotions which come and go. And the benefit is being totally present with those emotions in the moment. So if things are shit, feel the shit. It's okay. Just decide how long you want to feel the shit for. But what's really interesting, for me, this is a huge thing. We have a real problem with sitting in somebody else's discomfort. We will do anything we can to help that other person to feel better, because we can't deal with it. We struggle to sit there with people who are going through grief, who are going through sadness, who are going through things, especially if we're feeling happy, because it's like, well, I don't want to feel that. But just giving someone the space to feel what they're feeling and support them is always a good thing. And it's really interesting how uncomfortable we get sitting around other people who are not in a great place.
So it's interesting that you say that, because I think immediately the first thing that comes to mind is, to a certain degree, how empathic is everyone, because some more than others. But I agree, you're not wrong. People I've seen who are maybe a little bit more stony on the outside, I've seen people they just can't stand being around someone who is grieving or really struggling, and they just need it out of their space. And I guess it's just, I don't know if you'd agree, but I guess it's just like everyone deals with it differently. Some people just face it head on. Other people just work through it with hard exercise, and of course then other people just medicate and try to just push it away. So that's an interesting thought. But also, the other thing that you left me thinking about with what you just said was, we're all just circumstances of our life. Bad people are not born; they are made. And I think that's one thing that people don't really appreciate enough, is like there is no difference between the good person, the good Samaritan, and let's say the thief. The only difference is they had a different start. I'm gonna try one more quote. I think this was a Lincoln.
No, bring the quotes. I love the quotes.
I think this was one by Lincoln where he would point out that they are us had we lived the same lives.
Yeah, and that's where the compassion piece comes into it, because my mother, she's from Dudley. We forgive her that much. She's she's both negative and judgmental, and she knows this, and we joke about it all the time. I love my mum dearly. She's an amazing human being, but my God, she can be negative and she can be judgmental. And I said to her, she'll talk about someone. She go, well, I would never do that. And I went, no, okay, let's take a step back a moment. If you'd have lived your life as them, you'd have experienced the things that they'd experienced. And up until this point, everything had been exactly the same. I can guarantee you'd be doing exactly the same at this point. And that's where if you start to look at all of the things going on in the world at the moment, there's so many sides to it. There's so many things going on which we judge as good or bad, and actually good or bad's a perspective. You know, there's a great Buddhist concept called the concept of emptiness. So I always liken it to a cup. Is that this cup at the moment has no tea in it, which isn't a hint. Obviously, we'll do drinks later. Yeah, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Get the kettle on.
Yeah, get the kettle on quickly. But this cup has no emotion attached to it aside from the emotion which I put onto it. So it's empty. That could be a bad thing because it hasn't got tea in it. But it could be that actually it's a good thing because it has the potential to have a cup of tea in it. It could be that if I have this and it's full of tea and I drop it and spill it over myself, it's bad because I've spilt it over myself. It's all about how you view that particular thing. So good and bad are just concepts. That one of the phrases I remember years ago someone saying to me is that someone's terrorist is somebody else's freedom fighter. So, you know, depending on the perspective you have, things are very different. And this is why, and it's one of the things I really struggle with in the world at the moment, is we don't have this ability to kind of take up this third space, this space in the middle where we go, I'm over here with my experience, you're over there with your experience. Let's have this space in the middle where we can place our experiences together and we can understand it from each other's perspective and then come away changed. Because if you know, we're back to what you're saying about, you know, numbing and things like that, I think people are either looking for one of two things in life. I mean, happiness is a big thing, but people are either looking to not feel something because it hurts, or they're looking to feel something because something's missing. And that's where things like alcohol come into it. You know, I don't drink, and I drank for many years, and I've got no problem if anyone does drink. But generally, alcohol does one of two things. It either numbs what you're feeling, or it enhances what you're feeling. So you're looking for connection, you're looking for some kind of energy. It's all perspective.
Definitely. No, I couldn't agree more. It's I think the world would be a much better place if we all understood that, because with that logic, there is no bad. There are bad people. Let's not forget that. There are people who may be wired differently, who genuinely are messed up people who don't feel the bad when they do, when they seek out to hurt others. But generally, like you said, one person's terrorist is another person's hero. And I think, like, if we can see it from that, if we can agree on that perspective for, like, bottom line, and we can also agree that we're not meant to be out there shooting each other because we don't want to do it. It does not feel nice. Like, what do the majority of people come back with when they've gone out and they've done that? They've followed the commands. They come back messed up with PTSD. That PTSD comes from the fact that that's a traumatic experience to do that action to someone else. And I think, like, that's something that sadly people don't appreciate until they're in the thick of it. They've experienced that. But like you said, I couldn't agree more. I think if everyone could just take the time to actually sit down and talk to each other. I mean, we're talking like people don't want to do that. Obviously, there's a small percentage of people that are running the shots and sending people off to do that.
Oh yeah.
If those people could just, making some assumptions here, pull their head out of the dark place between their legs and actually just go and have these conversations and agree fundamentally, you're just trying to do what's good for your people, I'm trying to do what's good for my people, but we're all of the same world. What do we agree on here? Let's discuss what we disagree on and see what we can actually try to come together on. Because at the end of the day, we're all here. And to change that is just a monstrous act. So we might as well just try and find ways to live better together.
Yeah, and you know, all of that makes perfect sense. And then it's coming back to what are the drivers for that not happening. People don't like to be wrong. You know, and no one likes to think that actually the way they've been living their life is wrong and they need to change it. I mean, the number of times that I've had my eyes open to things and I've gone, oh my God, I hadn't even considered that. And, you know, sitting here as a 51-year-old guy, you know, heterosexual, white, middle-aged, God, what depression, all of those things. Growing up in the Western world, there's a lot of things which I've got which haven't been given to me necessarily, but they're things where I don't have to endure other things. And that's a real wake-up call for me. Because then, even with all of those, and I use the word privilege, and that's a big conversation in itself, even with all those privileges, I still get up some days and feel absolutely shit. You know, I still have struggles, I still have things which I have to work through. they're still there for every one of us. But being able to sit down and have that conversation with someone, and also do it. We used to get this a lot within the healthcare stuff I did. We had these ad hominem attacks, which people used to have, which is, let's discuss the thing in front of us, but actually, no, I'm going to make a comment on you, and I'm going to say, well, obviously you think that because you are. And it's attacking the person for their views, and that's when everything breaks down. It's having this space where we can talk about stuff. Like you said, what's the common ground? Look at the wars going on in the world at the moment. What is it people want? Well, I think that there are people out there who are supporting wars because it makes them money. Because that's their focus. Their focus is, if I have money, it means I'm safe. It means I can have the things that I want. It elevates my status. And it means that if I don't have to deal with those people, they can stay as dehumanized, and I don't worry about it.
Definitely.
So there's so much in that.
I'm going to stop us there because, I think we could
go off on that for days.
This could be a whole conversation. I'm curious just to get back onto the techniques and the importance of communication, especially from a perspective of business. We tried to summarize
I know we did,
one of
didn't
the
we?
things. If I'm coming to use a client, what kind of techniques could you teach me? Are there techniques, or is it just general practices, habits? How do we teach better communication?
It starts from communicating. And it starts from, one of the things I say to people is, if you want to speak more, if you want to get better at speaking, you have to speak more. You have to be out there doing it. So I remember a challenge I was given years ago by a coach of mine was to do 28 videos over 14 days, 2-minute videos twice a day. And I pretty much crapped myself. It was like, my God. And I did them because I was more scared of letting my coach down than actually doing the videos. But that opened up some things to me. It opened up the fact that I don't have to be perfect with videos. Because when I have a chat with someone, you get this, you get it in, it's brummy glory. I don't have to be this polished version of me to speak, and this polished version of me on social media. In fact, it's better that I'm not. So one of the techniques starts from the very place of, well, just speak. We're doing we have a meeting tonight, which we were talking about before we started recording. And one of the things we'll be doing there tonight is something I call the Brummy Speaker Randomizer, which is where we have a set of random subjects to talk about, and people pull them out of a hat and they speak about them for 2 minutes. And without any kind of prep at all, it's just a case of talk to me about that thing. Make up a story about it, do what you want. So one of the techniques really is just getting people to speak.
Would you say confidence then is the biggest thing that people typically struggle with? Let's say the goal is you want to be a better communicator. Does it all generally stem from you're not confident enough to project your message out, or is it technique? Are people just because I think I've seen? Sorry to interrupt. I think I've seen people can talk too much. There is a skill to
like me today.
Well, I'm interviewing you. In many respects, I'm tricking you into talking more because one of the techniques I'm not sure if you'd agree with is ask as many questions, try to speak about yourself as little as possible. So that's a skill I would say.
Curiosity.
Yeah, that's a skill I would say I've had to learn. But would you say most of it just stems from you've got to just have the confidence to be able to put yourself out there?
I think it becomes a discussion with your brain. So your brain will tell you that something is going to happen in a particular way. And obviously, if you put yourself out there on speaking, or if you put yourself there on video on social media, people are going to find all these things wrong with you that you find wrong with you. The aim is to get people past that hump. It's to, go out and put a video out and see what happens. And as an example, a client of mine recently has been struggling with some stuff, and we've talked a lot about vulnerability. And there's a very big continuum around vulnerability. If you look at Brené Brown's work around shame and vulnerability, it's fascinating to look at. And there's an oversharing component. And social media sometimes can be about oversharing. It can be, I'm going to share a story which is going to shock you for effect and likes and to get all the engagement. But actually sharing a story which is really important and vulnerable and getting it in that real nice place of connection is totally powerful. And one of my clients shared this story and got an absolute outpouring of support. And it was interesting kind of having a brief conversation with her afterwards that she was like, well, almost like not expecting that actually the people were going to view her negatively or view her in a very different way. And actually people just went, no, we need more of this. We need more of that openness and vulnerability. So a lot of the techniques are about almost exposure therapy. It's like, just go and do a video. I'll give you a subject to talk about. Go and talk about it, put it online. Or even if you don't want to put it online, I'll go and put it online for you. It is throwing people under the bus. Sometimes you just have to do that. You just have to say, go and do it. Is there a technique in that? Maybe. But I think if you wait for people to be ready, then people are never going to be ready. You know, I've done speaking gigs where I've definitely not been ready for it. I've taken on jobs where I've not been ready for it. I've probably talked myself down and out of a lot of experiences because I've gone, I'm not ready for it. And I'm sure that the ones I have done are a very, very small percentage, like 1 or 2% of what I could have done. But one of the big techniques is just saying to people, just go and record it and go and do it. Go and be imperfect. Go and be imperfect and then practice and review it and do it again and again and again and again until you become more comfortable. And I think a lot of it for me is, it's about, there's something which has to get you up on that stage. There's something which has to get you to that point where you can speak to an audience, whether it's video or in real life. And then the job is to remove the things which aren't you. I can look at, you know, some of the big speakers out there who I absolutely love to watch, and I can go and mimic them, and that's fine. I can go and try and be them. I can only do that to a point where it becomes uncomfortable for me. Then you find out. I find the me in it, and I go and talk from that space. So a lot of the techniques are really just getting people started. And people always get hung up on technology. And I'm a geek, and I know what your cameras are in here because I've looked at them, and they're beautiful cameras. But to be honest, you can get started in video with an iPhone and a nice window.
Definitely. I think what helped me especially was realizing these people that I admired, that I strived to be, was realizing that actually they've failed more than I've tried. And I'm not going to say the quote because that is another quote, but... No,
do another quote. No, don't shy away from quotes.
I live by this one. A master has failed more times than you have tried. And we obviously, typically we only, the people, when we admire someone or people's successes are celebrated, people think overnight success, which generally doesn't exist. It is a series of challenges that they have gone through, and they've probably failed many times, but they just kept going. And that was the thing that clicked for me, that it's okay and I have to fail in order to figure out how to succeed at what I'm trying to do. So yeah, I think as far as mindset, just hearing that, like if people take nothing else from just hearing maybe this clip, that's the one that I would say made the biggest difference to me personally, because that branches out into everything, is just knowing that this thing that I'm finding challenging, it's okay, and it was challenging for everyone else, but you've just got to do it. I think, like you've said, that is the hardest thing to do. Seeking discomfort is not what we naturally want to do. We want to try and avoid the discomfort, but diamonds are made under pressure.
Diamonds are made under pressure. Well, diamonds are forever if you're looking for a Bond film reference. But it is really interesting, and we do try and avoid discomfort. And actually, the modern world is designed for convenience. 24-hour shops, coffee in various different flavors. You can have a double caramel decaffeinated latte, whatever it is. You can have all of those things, and you can have them 24/7. Doors which slide open when you walk through them. I mean, that's properly Star Trek. A 6.5-inch rectangle in your pocket which can access all of the world's content. Everything is there for our convenience. What we don't do is we don't put ourselves into a place of discomfort. And actually, that's where the fun stuff happens, when we put ourselves into a place of discomfort. I am that annoying twat who goes and walks towards a door which is going to open itself, and I'll find the one which I have to pull to open. Or I'll walk up the stairs instead of going up the escalator or going up in the lift. There's all of these things which I'll do to create discomfort. But quite often it's, with speaking, it's do it and do it again and do it again. And if there's an aim, someone's watching or listening to this, and their aim is, well, do you want to go and speak at events? It's like, okay, cool. You can do that. There's probably initially going to be less opportunity for you to do that. So what about if you were to speak into a camera or into your phone every day and put it on social media? How would that look for you? And how would that help? Because I know that me speaking on stage, and I've spoken in front of 1,000 people before, that started off from me doing a video in Cannon Hill Park back in 2015. And that was then me iterating and doing more of those videos and practicing and getting interested in the craft of it. And looking at the message and having fun, and also having fun.
Mm.
You know, I don't. If videos aren't fun, I don't want to do it. If speaking isn't fun, I don't want to do it. And that's why on my bio it says, helping business owners to speak with authenticity, fun, and confidence.
Well, that was something I was going to ask actually. Where does fun play a role in this? Because I think number one thing I just keep thinking back to that I'm trying to fish from you here is it's never about selling the service. It's never about selling the product. It's what are you hoping to gain by investing in that? So if it's a service, you're not buying the actual thing itself. It's because you want it to get you to that thing. It's the bridge between something that you are paying or a desire that's going to give you that solution. So as far as the upsell of like fun within this, like where does that play a role in being able to improve your communication skills?
I mean, fun's a huge one of it's a huge value for me. Love, learning, freedom, and fun. 4 values, they fall off my tongue all the time. If I'm not doing something which fits with those 4 values, then it isn't good. I'm going to go and sit in the corner and get grumpy. The fun part is that when you find something which is fun and enjoyable, you're more likely to do it. You will find the energy to do things which are fun and enjoyable. We can all, we all talk about not having enough time, but there's quite a few people who've got time to sit and watch Netflix series. I do. I love Netflix. It's brilliant. I've got, I love Amazon and all of those things. Well, I don't love Amazon, but I love Amazon Prime. I don't, Jeff Bezos, I'm looking at you. But we can all find time for those things which we enjoy. So if you can make something which is going to really help with your business and you can enjoy it, that makes a big difference because you're more likely to get up and do it. We will avoid anything which we find uncomfortable and we'll move towards things which are comfortable. Same as if you're a runner. I remember with the runners I used to work with when I was a podiatrist, and if I've got clients around life coaching or business coaching when they want to do something, it's like I want to get up and run every day. Cool. Okay. So that's a declaration. Firstly, put it in your diary so you know it's going to happen. Secondly, make sure that the night before you're going to get up and run, all of your running gear is ready to go. Your water bottle's full, your trainers are there with the laces open, you've got all your equipment by the side of the bed, all your gear, you've got your phone charged, you've got your watch charged, you know the route you're going, slip everything on, off you go. If you don't have those things in place, you can guarantee between getting out of bed and finding your running gear, you've probably picked up your phone and checked on, your social media, or you've picked up a message from someone the night before about work or something. And it's any of those things are really useful in terms of habits. Don't have your phone in your bedroom, don't check social media. All of those things are a part of the process. But if you can do something which is fun, which you will enjoy, which you're drawn towards, you're more likely to do it. And so for me, the coaching I do with people, I hope is fun. I'm sure sometimes it's uncomfortable, and I suppose I lovingly kick people up the arse. Yeah. Because I do genuinely love the people I work with. I think they're amazing, and I think they've got a message which needs to be heard, and I want them to share that message. But there are times where I'll slip out of coach mode, which is all questions and let's hold space, which I hate as a phrase anyway, but let's hold space and work all this stuff out, and just fucking do it. Just go and do that thing today. Go and put it out there. And feel the discomfort of it, and then come back to me and know it'll be okay. But I've been there. I know it's going to be all right. Just go and do it. No one's really watching anyway. So there's an element of making it fun, but also a loving kick of the arse as well.
I've heard all sorts of different people talk, from, as you said, the people who all just read from their phone and it's just very monotone, to the people who have the whole room laughing. Is fun something that can be taught? How do you put more fun into when you're trying to speak to a room? Is that something that can be taught, or is that just a gift?
Absolutely. So Rishi Sunak, when he did his announcement of, this will date this massively, so I apologise, but when he did the announcement of the July 4th election, he walked out, he started to announce it, it's pissing it down with rain, he's getting a very expensive suit, very wet. Not once did he acknowledge it was raining. And that's just like denying your entire reality. Now, if he'd have turned around and said, look at the weather, it's messing up my suit, I hope that it's not a washout for us on July the 4th. You imagine the connection which you're going to get from that. And humour's really good at connecting people generally. So one of the things I will do, my current sort of 60 seconds starts off with, there's research has shown that there's 3 things people are scared of: public speaking, walking into a room full of strangers, and death. Now, everyone in this room has done the first 2, and please don't do the third. And that's kind of the start of it. Now, for some people, they'll laugh at that. They go, "Oh, that's really funny." And other people, they'll be like, "Oh, I don't get it." But by using humour and referencing what's going on around you, and my friend Beth Sherman, who's an Emmy nominated, or no, Emmy's not nominated. She'll slap me for that. She's going to tell me off for that. Emmy award winning comedy writer. She has a phrase which is "truth is funny." Everything is funny, and I think when it comes to marketing and however we do it, we're too busy trying to persuade people and tell people how good our stuff is. Maybe at some other points we could tell people that actually our stuff might not be right for them, it might not be as good, and be open and honest about it. And that can always get a laugh as well. I mean, it's like I said before, life coaching is about as tangible as a fart. Now, you can change the tangibility of a fart depending on whether you eat too many vegetables or not have a curry the night before. But it's bringing in those bits of life which are genuinely just a little bit weird and a little bit fun. And it connects with the audience. And I see some people who do this amazingly at events where they're naturally just a funny person. They're naturally just able to do it. And then I see some people who work on it and work on their humour and work on their jokes and work on those little weird bits in their 60 seconds which can connect people. Humour for me is, it's kind of non-negotiable. I'm usually having fun or laughing at something.
I guess it ties back to what you were saying about presence and just being in the moment.
Yeah. And stand-up comedy. So having done stand-up comedy and still do it now, I had an email this morning about an event we're setting up in Worcester, which is going to be brilliant. Stand-up comedians are immensely present. They are in the room now because you don't know what's going to happen. And you've got to be there, and it's the improv thing. Everything is a gift. So if somebody says something to you in the room, you work with it. You take it, you play with it, you give it back to them. It's brilliant. And stand-up comedy is about being present, and I love that. I love that feeling. It's under pressure, nowhere to hide.
Solve the problem.
Well, and one of the lines which I've used in comedy before is that if you're funny, it's your fault. If you're not funny, it's your fault. The buck stops with you, and that's part of the fun. So maybe every 60-second pitch I do is basically a mini stand-up comedy gig. I don't know.
I don't know if you'd agree, but it's like what you were saying with like the mindset and everything. It's hard, especially when you go into self-employment, or even if you're already in self-employment. It's being accountable for yourself. So one thing that I've started doing now, I've been trying to figure out what does the perfect schedule look like, because I offer. The work I do is like the full package of digital marketing, and some things take up more of my time, some things take up less.
Yeah.
So my schedule is really hard to keep. Like, I could sit, if I did nothing else, I could sit behind a desk and I could be fairly consistent with it. But I also want to invest time into conversations like this. And what I've noticed is, so I came into this year with the goal of to get more awareness, to get more opportunity to work with people. I need better awareness, and how am I going to do that? I need to put myself out there, because no one can buy from you unless they know you.
Yeah.
And that's why we do video. Ultimately, that's why we post on social media. So I came into this year with the goal of more content every week, daily if I can. But I'm not ashamed to say I failed at that goal. And part of that reason was something would come up, because I'll always prioritize the client, just because if you're working with me, I want to just do the best for the person who's paying.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I've come to this realization, or should we say mindset, of I've got to be accountable to myself as well. So I'm very rarely late, because respectful, I'm going to show up to people, but I'm failing to show up for myself. I have never missed a post for a client when I'm managing a social media or something, but I consistently miss posts that I said I'd do for myself. So what I've started doing now is in my Google Calendar, where most of my stuff is tracked, I've put post something.
Yeah.
I think it's 9 a.m. and that I'll get a reminder every day. I'm still not doing it, but it's that accountability. And I think, like you were talking about, you don't really have a process, which is, I think it's just fine. But would you agree? It's really, if we struggle to be accountable to ourselves, and really when we seek some sort of help, we just want someone to give us that friendly kick up the tushy, and just to be accountable, that someone is like there with us. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting that when you're talking about the productivity element, I think that's one of the trappings of a modern life. And I think we've been doing this for, ever since we've had mills and things like that. It's about how can you get the most work done in a period of time. Mm. It's never about whether it's good quality work. It's does it make enough money? Yes, fine, then that's okay, that's productive. So we think about what can we squeeze into a particular time. And if you ever get a chance to look at the data on people working from home and when people work in offices with other people, how much time do they actually work within that time? And you might have an 8-hour day and you're actually productive for 3 hours. Well, what could you do with the other 5 hours? You could play around with it in a different way. But we do, when it comes to business, particularly small business owners, particularly when entrepreneurs and when we work for ourselves, we don't put ourselves first. And I'm guilty of that. I burnt out in 2015 because of that. I got rid of my podiatry practice because I realised I created this prison which trapped myself. And trust me, there's some days we're doing what I'm doing now. I'm like, what am I doing? Why have I done that? And it's a very easy trap to get into because you go, clients. Well, the clients are important because the clients pay me money. The clients pay me money because I have to have a business which runs. I have to then have money because I've got to pay for my electricity and gas and live within a modern society. But we end up losing ourselves as part of that process. I have certain things for me which are, and I'm not going to say non-negotiable. I'd like to, but I know the truth is that they're not. So Monday morning, I've been to the gym this morning. I've had a workout. I've had my breakfast. I've done my posting stuff on LinkedIn. I have got the things done this morning that I needed to do before I wanted to get here. And for me, gym is a really big, important part of it. Reading's a really big, important part of it. I would say time with family, but I'd be lying because I'm separated. So it's a very different thing. But there are things which, for me, I could be a lot better at. But I let business get in the way of it. I let this feeling that I'm not where I want to be in my business. Therefore, I've got to work harder at it. And that, again, is a modern trapping. The idea that we should work harder rather than the working smarter element. But yeah, totally agree. We put ourselves far down the line.
So my last series of questions, I want to do a little bit of an exercise here.
Ooh.
Let's say someone comes to you. They are the most challenging case you could possibly imagine. Now, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but I don't think anyone can actually overcome these hurdles to become better communicators unless they want to do it. You can't force someone to do it. You would agree with that?
Yeah.
Someone comes to you, they know they're terrible without you having to tell them that. How do you approach the most difficult, the most nervous, the most terrified person? Let's say they can't even stand up and say their name in front of a crowd of people. Is it possible for them to actually get better at that? And how do you approach that kind of challenge?
That's a really good question. There's always a way in which people communicate. The story which popped into my head is when you have a cold and you can't possibly do anything, you feel like you're dying, it's the end of the world, it's a man flu, it's the worst man flu which any man has ever had, but then you get the chance to do something which you really enjoy. And you realise for the period of time that you do that thing that you really enjoy, you do not have one symptom of the flu or the cold. But as soon as you stop, it comes back again. And you don't even notice that you've been without that for 2 hours. There are always exceptions. So if you say you can't stand up in front of a room and speak, well, you must be able to go and talk to someone in a shop to go and buy something, or you must be able to talk to someone on the phone. There'll be some kind of in. And I have a friend who is a photographer, amazing photographer, and we were talking about kind of public speaking, and he said, the worst thing for me in the world would be to stand up in front of an audience and do that. And I said, well, okay, what if you were to do a kind of presentation on your work with slides, whatever it was, but the room is dark and you sit at the back with a microphone. So no one has to see you, but you can talk about all of your videos or all your photos if you're having a conversation with somebody. And you do it from the back of the room and no one's looking at you, they're looking at your art. It's a different way of working through. And there is always a way of doing it. Whether, you don't want to stand up in front of a room of people and say your name. Well, what if you were to record something separately on your phone and you were going, I'm just going to play this for you, or even just hold it on, just press play and do that. You're still presenting to the room, but in a different way. You find the flex, you find the way to get it to work for you. Jim Morrison in the Doors, when he first started singing, he turned away from the audience because he didn't want to look at the audience. And he sang with the audience behind him. And that took him a while before he got to actually turn around to the audience and do it. And, if you follow the Doors, you'll know what the performer he became. There's ways of doing it. And I think coming back to your first point on that is, they've got to want to do it. There's got to be something on the line to push people past it. And if they're working in an organisation where they're told, if you don't sort your communication out and you don't do this, then you're probably going to be fired, that will push people on. But there may well be someone who has that internal motivation of going, well, actually, I communicated to someone very badly recently and it didn't feel good, and I never want to feel that again. I still remember being an A&E nurse, and I had as a student podiatrist, I remember there was a lady who was mentoring me, and she stopped me one day and she said, I want to have a word with you about your communication skills. And I went, okay, it's cool. So I'm more than happy to have a word with you about communication skills. What do you want to know? And she went to start talking about it. And I said, well, okay, but first, can I tell you what my background is? And she went, yeah, of course. And I said, look, A&E nurse, said for a number of years, still a qualified nurse now. I said, I've had to spend quite a lot of my A&E career giving bad news to very nice people. Like, telling a lady that we've been defibrillating her husband and unfortunately he has died and he was 40 years old and we've done everything we can and we're sorry for her loss and all of this kind of stuff. And, saying this to a lady who's also in the room with her family. I said, I've had to give people, talk to people about the procedures we're going to do. I've had to talk to people, about having cannulas and injections and things like that. I said, so I spent quite a lot of time talking to people about tough stuff. I said, but I'm always up to learn more about my communication skills. So shall we talk about that a little bit more? And she never wanted to pursue it after that. Because it's like, okay, I think you probably know. And in fact, what I said to her is, I don't need necessarily to improve my communication skills at this point. I said, but what I need to know is more about podiatry, because that's what I lack. I lack the knowledge of the subject. But when you've been in a position where you've had to learn to give bad news to lovely people, you do learn to communicate very quickly. And I think there's so many places now where we don't have to communicate with people. You can order stuff online 24/7. You don't have to go to the local shop and order something if you don't need to. And with my kids, I was very clear early on that I would want them to be able to walk into a shop and be able to say, please, thank you, and ask for something and not have any problems. And they've been brilliant. But there's so many people who don't get to do that. There has to be something which is at stake. That was that went round the Wrekin and maybe even answered the question, I don't know.
Well, fair play, Dave. I don't think I could be in that position to be giving bad news to good people.
I think this is what one of the superpowers of nurses is, and doctors and other medical people and healthcare people, is that they are able to spend time with people who are in significantly crap places and be with them and presence, and they're very present as people. And it works wonders. We all remember the medical people who've got the best bedside manner, and we remember the ones who haven't more than anything else. But it's got to be hard to deal with all of that information, all that knowledge, and all that energy. We talked about being empathy and things like that, and empathic. To be around people where their energy is all over the place is quite hard because you do absorb it.
People rarely forget what we said, but they generally remember how you made them feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big part of the work is yes, you can stand up in front of an audience and you can say the words and you can have the pauses and the intonation and all of those things, but it's all the stuff which goes on underneath which people feel. It's how do you prepare for it? How do you finish it off? And to be quite honest, I think a lot of the stuff which people say isn't that life-changing and impactful, but it is enough if delivered in the right way. And that's the feeling bit.
Mm. We've covered quite a lot of topics.
We have.
Just as we're coming to an end with this, I just want to try and summarise the key takeaway from this. I'm going to try my best. You tell me if I've got anything wrong here.
There's nothing wrong. Remember we talked about this before. There's no such thing as good or bad.
Okay. Well, there's a challenge.
There's a challenge.
So number one thing, identify what it is you're trying to achieve. So you have to have that intent to want to do it. Mindset. Go into it knowing that you're going to fail and it's okay, and you should seek to fail.
Yeah.
Be kind to yourself as you would want others to be kind to you, because that is going to carry you through those hardships. And what was the other thing I was going to say? I think as a foundation, that's pretty much it, really, isn't it? It's and seek the discomfort and just do it. Just try it.
I think I'd add to that is have fun.
Try and have fun.
Just have fun, yeah. And there was a great phrase someone came up with for me recently, which is, when you're doing something, ask yourself the question: will this matter in a year's time? You'd be surprised how much we worry about today, which you won't even worry about
or even remember.
Yeah, or even in a day's time, but we hold on to stuff, and one of the things I do, and I know you've summarised, and I'm coming back in with stuff because I'm just being really annoying. Teach men's mindfulness and meditation at a place local to us, and one of the things I'll say while they're doing the meditation is, your mind might drift off to something which you're worried about tomorrow, or it might drift off to that thing which happened when you were 12, which you've just not let go. That's what we do. We worry about these things, and some things are indelible and powerful and sit with us, and some things are just literally like a fart in the wind.
Amazing. I'm going to give you a fist bump, Dave, to wrap it up.
Yay! Thanks, man. Really appreciate it. Thank you. It's a great conversation.
It's been fun. Thank you for your time.
No, you're welcome, mate.
All right.